Welcome to Two Deep, Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. My name is Pete Berthod, and you know my co-host Robbie, and we have a special guest tonight. We got Sam Jessee. You might know him from the Hokie Ball podcast. You might know him from the Locks of Saturday. But Sam, thank you for coming on with us tonight.
Hey man, it's I'm happy to do some deep dive research into these first few games. Maybe went a little deeper than I thought I was, but I'm excited to talk about it.
It'll be helpful for you throughout the year to have some of that knowledge back there. But yeah, we're going to get into our summer opponent previews for this upcoming season. We're going to do the first 6 games tonight. But to kick us off, Rob, why don't you give us a cheers?
Well, cheers to the football season. This is really where it starts. When we hit the first preview on the first 6 games, this is, for me at least, when football season really begins, because it's the first time I really get in depths on Old Dominion and Marshall and a lot of these teams that otherwise I just kind of look at and think in the back of my mind during the offseason, yeah, we should beat them. And now I have to actually do some diligence and some research. So cheers to kicking off the football season.
Cheers. Yeah, I always think it's interesting. You go through these teams, and as you tear into them a little bit more, all of a sudden a game you thought might be winnable is now going to be a lot tougher, and a game you thought was going to be really tough, hey, maybe we got a better shot. And we're going to get into ODU here shortly, but first I wanted to kick it off with just some of the recruiting news. There's not so much going on right now besides recruiting. I mean, you have the Bob Huggins scandal and the Pat Fitzgerald scandal, but as long as your school's not in the negative, it's usually just positive recruiting news, and that's how it's going for us. We got athlete Noah Jenkins committed on 6:30. So right after we recorded the last time, Jenkins came in, and if you remember, Robbie and I talked about a big recruiting weekend coming up, and there was a lot of positive vibes afterwards, but no actual commitments on that second big recruiting weekend. So it was getting people were getting nervous. I know Sam was kind of messaging people like, I'm waiting on these commitments. And Jenkins jumped in the boat. He was the first one, 3-star from Highland Springs, had a Penn State offer, South Carolina, Ole Miss, West Virginia, UVA, among others. And so that was a really nice commitment. It's not the highest guy in the class, but it's a nice pickup and an athlete that'll probably get used, I would guess, on the defensive side of the ball. Not completely clear, but we have so many wideouts and so many running backs that it's probably going to be back there. Do you guys have any commentary on Jenkins, or just keep flowing? All right.
I'll take every Highland Springs player that they got, every single one of them.
That's all you need to know. Just chalk it up.
The big one I thought was Gerard Johnson, because this was a defensive end, a position of need, a sought after all along college football, trying to get those ends and edge rushers. He committed on 7-1, and he was a composite 4-star. So not only was he a 4-star, he's from Virginia Beach. He was competing, like the 2 schools that were his final 2 were UVA and Virginia Tech. That's very rare these days. So to get a 6'4" kid, a 4-star that might have gone to UVA and have him come to our backyard, that's huge. He was a top 400 in the composite, 3rd highest recruit in our class right now, a top 10 player in VA. This was very big. Now, it's funny though, his offer list wasn't as comprehensive as some of the other guys in this class. That might be based on maybe 247 just likes the film, or, people, the evaluations are good, but he hasn't got the offers, or maybe the offers just aren't publicized. I'm not really sure how all that works.
Yeah. So, Sam said he'll take all the Highland Springs guys. I will take all the defensive ends. If you know me on the podcast, please just come to Virginia Tech and let's get something established on the defensive end position finally.
He's the quietest 4-star from Virginia Beach of all time.
Yes.
But, if you look at him physically, he looks like a big-time defensive end. So really excited to get kind of that length, that athleticism into the program. It's a roster that, quite frankly, just doesn't have a ton of that right now.
Absolutely. And we need more depth at defensive end. Even this guy hopefully will be a starter down the road, but it's just amazing how little experience and whatnot we have in the program. If it wasn't for Antoine Powell coming in, we could be in dire straits for this upcoming year. So it'll be nice to get Gerard Johnson in the fold next year. Wide receiver, Chance Wiggins, committed on 7-6. He was a high-end 3-star, another VA kid, 6'3", a Penn State and a Pitt offer, Maryland, UNC. So you'll notice all these schools are in our footprint. UVA, WVU, and we beat out all of them to get Chance Wiggins. So that was that's another really nice pickup. And we're not lacking for wide receivers, but I'll take talent on the outside, and he's got a cool name. So let's roll with Chance. But all three of these guys are VA kids. They're like I just mentioned the footprint. We're pounding it. And 9 of our 14 commits are from Virginia, Maryland, or UNC. So we are right where we want to be. And we had talked about why it's good to recruit the footprint many times. For me, it was always, especially under Fuente, it was I want guys close to home already, because if things aren't going well and they want to transfer or they're thinking about transferring, well, maybe they won't if they're already close to home. But Chris Coleman pointed something out on the TSL pod that, like, when you are starting to take guys from those other schools, not only are you helping VT, you're hurting those other schools. And that was a perspective I hadn't really thought about much.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we've seen other schools in the state, and we're going to talk about a couple, at least one of them tonight, and that it those players need to be coming to Virginia Tech, and that is your base year in and year out. You may have ebbs and flows in what your recruiting can do, but if it's not founded upon getting the guys that you're supposed to, you're never going to have. That's why the whole Texas to VA, North Carolina to VA, it was never going to work and create something sustainable, because it wasn't based. There was no baseline, like foundation to the recruiting, so that you could handle the ebbs and flows. Those are the ones that are supposed to really top off a good recruiting class, not the
Yes.
ones that you're relying on to come in year out.
That's your Davy Belfort from Florida, right? Like he's the kind of guy you want to add to a solid base of a footprint class. But the current 2024 recruiting class is sitting at number 39 in the composite. Couple more big targets out there, most notably Keelan Adams, Brody, as he's known, his nickname. He is committing on Thursday, just 2 days from now, 7/13. Another kid from Virginia Beach, Green Run High School. And this week we did get some crystal balls to the Hokies on 247. So people were getting all worked up. He's got a Bama offer, Michigan, Auburn, FSU, countless. I mean, all the big schools are there between us and South Carolina. And Doug Bowman was talking about how much momentum South Carolina has right now. So if we could beat out Shane for this kid, that would be awesome. Top 200 guy. If we were to get him, he's a .9277. He'd be around the 30th best recruit we've ever gotten in the history of the recruiting services. So Keelan Adams would be a big time get.
And and going against South Carolina, I think that's huge. I was talking over this past weekend to a Clemson fan who's pulling their hair out with what Beamer's been able to do in recruiting that footprint thus far. It's not helping them at all, that's for sure, because that's right in their backyard. But that would be a huge pull for us on and really generate a ton of momentum in the ways that we all hoped Pry would actually execute on, and he promised he would.
Yeah, Virginia Tech is starting to be a lot more, at least, competitive in these high-end recruiting battles, and that's kind of what Brent Pry was hired to do, not only to coach football, but also as a recruiter. And I think we're seeing about, a little over 500 days into the job, we're starting to see the fruits of that right now from Brent Pry. So the vision is in works, I think, for Brent Pry in terms of the recruiting aspect of the job.
Yes, he's going to have to prove some stuff on the field this year in particular, after everyone will keep pointing at that 3 wins until we outdo that number. And with that being said, let's get to some of the numbers on Virginia Tech before we hop in to ODU and Purdue and whatnot. In the FPI, Virginia Tech's at 63, the S&P plus 65. So right in the middle of college football in both those rankings. Athlon actually has us significantly lower, down at 78. And our projection for this upcoming season from Athlon is 5-7 and 2-6 in the ACC. In the On3 Portal Index rankings, we are number 16 in the country. And that's out of 69 power schools. They've only ranked those ones in their performance index. They kind of take the people that left, take the people that came in, and give you a net rating. And Virginia Tech sitting at 16. We had one guy drafted in Chamari Connor. Our best unit projects to be the DBs, and I think you guys would probably both agree with that. And in terms of our Athlon preseason all-conference, we had 3 gentlemen, Ali Jennings, Mansour Delane, and punt returner Tucker Holloway. You'll notice on here as we go through, like you get down to Florida State, they got like 13 all ACC guys on their team or something like that. So that's kind of where Virginia Tech's coming in. So when you hear us talk about FPI or Athlon's rankings, just know that we're in the 60s, in the high 70s on Athlon, but right in the middle of college football. And hopefully we can outdo that ranking. But right now, let's get into ODU. This is a big first game of the season. Me and Robbie joked about it being at 8 p.m. on the ACC network, the ACC network game of the week. And I'm not sure why they put this game at night. I guess it's the in-state rivalry, the fact that they've beaten us a couple times, but we are at home this time. And I'll let Sam kick off some of the numbers. Their projection from Athlon, I'll leave you with this, for 2023 was 3-9 and a 2-6 record in the Sun Belt. And so they're not projected to have a particularly good season, but guess what? They went 3-9 last year and still beat us.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just quote on, this is not a very good football team in Old Dominion. This is a rebuilding year off of a 3-9 season. They have a lot of question marks. I'm a Lindy's guy for preseason magazines, big Lindy's guy. So right now, Old Dominion is sitting at number 124. There's only 130 something teams that they rank. If you guys are familiar with this Action Network, which is a popular sports betting conglomerate site, they have a metric they used with Bill Connolly of ESPN and Phil Steele called TARP. And what that does is it kind of takes into account all of the production that is coming in through the transfer portal and returning. And they're 120th in the country. So not only is this team not very talented last year, they're not bringing back a lot of the guys that did very well. Now, partially that's because Virginia Tech took their best player, but in Ali Jennings. But so we're looking at a team that, quite frankly, doesn't have a lot in the cupboard. They're going to start an FCS quarterback. They're starting running backs, a JUCO guy, a pretty talented JUCO guy, but still just kind of shows that the talent level of this program is pretty low in 2023. I have a lot of numbers about last year's game and this year's game, so I'll let you guys give some initial thoughts before I ramble too long.
See, this is why we invited Sam on, because he's already bringing up TARP. You gotta love that. I just have some more basic things I'll say before I hand it over to Rob. They did end their season last year on a 6-game losing streak. So maybe they were playing a little bit better earlier in the season. And obviously we knew the comedy of errors that happened in our game. And I'll let Sam talk about that later, but just 4 returning starters on offense, 3 on defense. And their only all conference pick was defensive tackle Alonzo Ford. He left after spring practice. And so he's not even there anymore. They did have a punter on the all Sun Belt team. And maybe, Jason Henderson, the linebacker. So they had 2 guys, but one of their 3 all ACC guys did leave after Athlon was printed. So that's never a good thing. Quarterback wise, what are you seeing there, Rob? Like, what do you have on their quarterback?
Well, Hayden Wolf left the program, right? And he transferred out. So he wasn't exactly, he went to Western Michigan. So you can say Western Michigan's had some good seasons. If you were going to compare the 2 teams, at least from a conference standpoint, roughly on par with each other. So I don't know all of the background on that, but not the best sign for those guys. But when you really dig into the team right now for this season, they got Grant Wilson. I think he's a junior and is projected to start for them. I'm not so sure that it's really, and he's going to have a whole lot to throw to. We talked about Ali Jennings and then his departure. I think they get 2 wide receivers back from last year. Not the most productive guys out there. So I'm not really sure I'm even that concerned with Grant himself as much as I am with. I don't know that they're going to have a ton to throw to here, or at least without Ali Jennings on the team.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that for sure. And their running backs should take a step back without Watson. If you look at their SP plus on offense, it's 128th. So that speaks to they didn't have a very good quarterback in Wolf to begin with. Now he's gone, as Robbie mentioned. And these 2 guys battling it out, they're probably not it either. And so you throw in, maybe they got a few receivers back. I think even 5 out of their top 7 receivers are back. But like Rob said, there's not a lot of production there. So what are you really going to get if the quarterback can't get them the ball? They lost one of their best playmakers at running back. They lost their best playmaker at wide receiver. It's going to be a rough go on their offense. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think you throw into that they're also without 3 other, they lost 3 starting offensive linemen as well, and their starting tight end who's now in the NFL.
Yeah. And they were 125th in rush yards per game last year. So with all those linemen going out, the running back going out, you're already like almost dead last in the run game. Like you say, oh, their quarterback's struggling. Maybe they'll turn to the run. I'm not so sure that's going to happen either.
And not to pile on, well, but I am going to pile on anyway. Grant Wilson is a Fordham transfer, and I think he took like 5 snaps last year. This is not like somebody who blew the doors off other teams at Fordham. So this is going to sound mean, but I won't say. They found this guy like over kind of cleaning up the nearby McDonald's, and they're like, "You play football? Yeah, you play football. Let's go. Come on." That's I think how this came about, but it looks to be a struggle for this team.
Yeah, and you'll notice with that Fordham thing, Ricky Ronnie, Penn State guy. Mm-hmm. You got Tyler Bowen with us, Penn State, Fordham connection, Brent Pry. It's kind of all full circle with all these guys. But Ricky Ronnie, I mean, he's kind of a fiery guy, just 9-16 over his first 2 years. But he outcoached Brent Pry last year. And so that's going to be a storyline going into this game. And I'm sure Brent was pissed about it because those guys know each other and know each other pretty well. So let's flip over to their defense because it's significantly better than their offense. 76th in the SP Plus after spring practice, 80th in yards per play last year. Jason Henderson is really the story of their defense because he led the nation in tackles. And not only did he broke the NCAA record, right, Sam?
Yeah, and Jason Henderson is really talented linebacker. I think Dax Hollifield with a little bit more lateral mobility. He's a really good player. He's probably an NFL guy at least, maybe not a superstar in the league, but he's a guy who'll get a shot. Last year, their defense was very bend, don't break. They gave up a lot of yards, and in fact, against Virginia Tech, they gave up a ton of yards, but they do get pretty good in the red zone. So, I think for Virginia Tech, similar to last year's matchup, it'll be about converting drives more than will it be about can they move the ball or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just to harp back on Henderson and how key he's going to be to this defense. His 186 tackles were 5 shy of Luke Kuechly's in 2011, and the most tackles by any player in FBS since Luke Kuechly, who was really, really good and a really good pro. So I agree with you. He does have likely a pro future, this kid. They got Terry Jones back at safety. He was 3rd on the team in tackles and had 2 picks last year. Their rushing defense was pretty terrible. And you talked about the bend but don't break, but they gave 198 yards per game in the run game, 118th in the country. Now, they did face an incredible amount of rush attempts. So only 74th in yards per carry against. So on a play-per-play basis, they weren't so bad against the run, but I don't know if they were just down in a lot of games. I know the record wasn't good, but or they played a lot of option teams, but they got run on a ton and people were throwing up yards. They were 103rd in passing efficiency. So in reality, like the passing efficiency on a per play basis was actually worse than the rushing, even though they're giving up 200 rushing yards a game. So this defense is kind of weird. Like you look at those numbers, it looks pretty bad, but it's a lot better than their offense. And it's against us. I mean, hey, they can hang in the game.
Yeah. The thing that you mentioned was they get 3 returning starters back. 2, I think now, with one not being there. And I don't know that they have a senior starter on the whole defensive side of the ball. I think it's all sophomores, juniors, and maybe sprinkled in with some freshmen as well. So at least on the depth chart that I saw, I think to Sam's point originally, it's a rebuilding year on both sides. So we'll see what it looks like, next year. But there's at least a little bit of youth on that side of the ball.
Yeah. Overall, let's just attack this game 10,000 feet. The spread is 2 touchdowns right now, right around 13 and a half, maybe 13. It's 14. It's moving around in favor of the Hokies. And you see a number like that. I think it was an 8-point spread last year on the road, or maybe got down to 6 at game time, but that makes me feel good. I don't know if I should feel good, but at home, you got one of these kids coming into lane in the opener at night at quarterback. Like I feel good about Brent being a little aggressive, or I should say Chris Marv this year being a little aggressive, getting after the quarterback. And since they lack playmaking at pretty much everywhere but linebacker and wide receiver, I think we'll have a significant athletic advantage in this game.
I think it's also important to remember last year that, look, Tech ended up losing the game, but they dominated that game in a lot of facets as well. I don't know if your audience is, familiar with the stat expected points added, but basically what it does is it contextualizes the yards gained on a certain play, right? So if you get 10 yards from your own 20 to your own 30, that's not the same as 10 yards from the opponent's 11 to the opponent's 1, right? So that's basically what expected points added, or EPA, measures. And when you look at EPA margin, Virginia Tech's game against Old Dominion was the 3rd highest EPA margin by a losing team in all of FPS over the past 2 seasons.
Wow.
Oh, more than one season, huh?
If you played that game 100 times, 99 of them Virginia Tech would win.
God.
It is a statistical anomaly. One of the only major games that was worse was Alabama-Tennessee last year, when Alabama scored like 60 points and lost. Tech had 5 turnovers, over 100 yards of penalties. A botched snap on a field goal. Crazy things happened in that game. And I do think there is going to be an air of revenge in Lane Stadium. I don't know if you would quite call this a rivalry, but I think there's going to be a bit of anger on that Tech sideline.
I hope so.
Hope there's, there better be. I think that if there isn't, then we got some problems. I think this should be a game that maybe they play with their food a little bit early on, but I think Virginia Tech should have its arms around ODU relatively soon into early, third quarter, and have the game handily taken care of. If not, it is a bad omen for the rest of the season for sure.
Yeah, I think we'll move the ball on this team, especially on the ground. Henderson could be a little bit of a problem, but if you stay away from him, scheme him up a little bit, you should be straight. And if we can't separate before the fourth quarter, or even late into the fourth quarter, that's going to be a real problem and a really bad omen that not much has changed since last year. But this should absolutely be a convincing win, in my opinion. We should match that spread. We really should, because we were the better team last year, as Sam indicated. I had written down, when we were losing those tight games or battling in games and losing, what I considered to be a Virginia Tech fail, and that would be a penalty, a turnover, a missed kick, a sack allowed, or a fourth down conversion allowed. And in the ODU game, we had 22 of those fails. That was more than any other game of the season. NC State, we had 18. GT, we had 19. You'll notice we lost those 2 games by 1 point. We could not get out of our own way. We made so many mistakes, especially early in the year. And you hope that Marv calling the plays, Pry being the head coach, that we will, just the head coach, should eliminate those games you're like, how the hell did we lose that game? That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
You guys ready to move on Purdue? You got anything else on ODU?
38-10 Hokies.
Okay.
38-10.
And at the end of the pod, I am going to ask you guys to give me the record through the first 6 games of what you just, you don't have to give me the exact, but what you think will happen after those first 6 games. Rob, you had something?
No, I was just going to say, let's get to the big drum.
Yeah. Purdue Pete, man, coming to Blacksburg. After many years, we went there in 2015. We won a very odd game, kind of a quiet crowd game, and Motley went in there and we won. But now they're coming here, 9/9, 12 p.m. on ESPN2. Purdue, they lost their coach, and he was a highly sought after guy. Some people think he's going to be the savior for Louisville, and Jeff Brom, not Brian Brom. And they got a new coach over at Purdue, Ryan Walters. He's in his first year. He was the DC at Illinois, and before that he worked at Missouri. Both teams known for having some pretty high quality defense, particularly this past year at Illinois under Brett Bielema. Walters was very, very good for them, but he is a young man. In fact, he is younger than both Robbie and I at only 37 years old. I believe he's the youngest coach in FBS currently. So I'm hoping that maybe coming to Lane Stadium in his second game might be a little too much for him. But how do you guys see the Purdue Boilermakers playing out? Rob, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I'll go. I think the interesting part of this is with Jeff Brom leaving and Ryan Walters coming in. Most of the talk that I see is around Graham Harrell coming in from WVU and the offensive coordinator, what he can do. And that's because Brom's offense, in particular, the passing offense, was so prolific that the question is really, can they can continue that? This was one of the best passing offenses, really, nearly in the country for a couple of years there. So that's really where my focus is, even more so than the head coach, is what's going to happen with him. And along with that, you have transfer Hudson Card coming in from Texas, and um, I don't know. I know he has a big arm. We didn't see a ton from him at Texas, so it's kind of a question mark on what he's going to look like. And you have the relationship between him and Graham Harrell coming in to see what we're going to have. I don't know, but it'll be interesting. And I don't know what to make of Hudson Card whatsoever, other than, I think he's a real athletic guy. He was obviously a highly coveted recruit early on, but it's kind of TBD what his performance is going to look like.
Do you have thoughts on Card and the offense, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, Hudson Card is the exact kind of quarterback that used to terrorize Virginia Tech, a guy with a big arm and can scramble. But there's a reason he didn't get much action at Texas. That he's can make a lot of mistakes, and he's a guy who, look, their quarterback recruiting has been unlike anything the sport has ever seen over the past year. So no shame in him transferring. I think what Robbie said is spot on. Graham Harrell, as the offensive coordinator for West Virginia, kind of took it to Brent Pry last year. And it was really a struggle for that Virginia Tech defense. So, in many ways, how the first game was a revenge game for kind of the program, game two might be a bit of a revenge game for Brent Pry, because he'll have to scheme up against the Graham Harrell offense that they lost a lot of playmakers. They have a new quarterback, but they return a lot of guys on the offensive line. They return their running back, Devin McAbee, who is Sam Rogers. He's the exact same player. Literally, he's the exact same player as Sam Rogers. I mean, there's a lot of question marks around this team.
Except for more productive.
He's more productive. I will say, just there's a lot of question marks around this team. Their win total is set at 5.5 for the season, favoring the under. There's a reason for that. There's not a ton of athleticism and talent across this team, but they have a lot of good coaches who have done really well the last few stops.
Yeah. And the things that stand out to me about Purdue is that they had 5 guys drafted in the NFL draft last year. That is not a Purdue thing. That doesn't happen. And maybe Aiden O'Connell went a little too high and all that kind of stuff. But nevertheless, 5 guys drafted means a lot of talent went out the door at Purdue. And that doesn't get replaced easy, especially when the coach that brought in that talent is no longer there. Then you go down to their portal losses, because Louisville has been destroying them in the portal, taking a lot of guys with them over there. 61 out of 69 teams in the net portal ranking on 3. So they didn't perform well in the portal, even though they got Card. That means everywhere else they lost. Because I actually think Card's his pass was top 20 level. Now, he was filling in on a very good team, but it was nevertheless, like, he looked pretty good to me. I'm hoping that losing that talent, not performing well in the portal, they won't have enough to stay with us at home. But it's going to be a challenge. There was the thing about their offensive line, like I mentioned, the guy from ODU left after spring practice. They lost 6th-year senior Eric Miller off their offensive line after spring practice. And so they've got lots of seniors in their 2 deep on the O-line, but losing Miller after the fact, you have to factor that into some of these projections that were made. There, you bring them down just one notch. So the offensive line, it's still good. Card, I think, will whip it around, as Sam was talking about. But I think we can manage this offense, and hopefully you guys agree with that. Let's flip over to defense, and if you want to pop back for any offensive notes, we can do that. Just 4 returning starters on defense, but they could still be solid under Walters right away. This is a guy that is known, him and his DC, I think it's Kane.
Mm-hmm.
They've been known to be good schemers, and they're going to play this 3-4, which we don't suit up against a lot, and so that could kind of throw a monkey wrench into us. But their personnel for playing that 3-4 might not quite be there yet. Rob, do you have any notes on the defense?
No, I was going to say that Kevin Kane he went to Illinois and he was putting outstanding, like top. I think they were top scoring and total defense in the country last year, if I'm not mistaken. So Illinois is not a powerhouse of defensive talent. Let's be honest here. So he is good, and the scheme obviously works. The question is, will he have enough time, and what does he absorb from the prior roster coming in? That's really the only question mark, because what he did at Illinois was pretty remarkable over that course of a couple of years, that they had top defenses. So that will be interesting. The 3-4 scheme is unique in that sense, and the linebackers, I think they're deep there. So I don't know. I think our hope for this game to go the way that we want it to is really for the offense not to show up. I think the defense should be in pretty good shape for them. And I think it'll be not the best that we face, but I think it'll be well coached, and they definitely have some talent on that team.
Yeah, I think, a big question mark around Purdue is how they're going to transition from a classic 4-3 to the 3-4. Like I said earlier, there are some concerns that the whole roster, especially on defense, kind of lacks some length and athleticism needed to play that 3-4. And the defensive line is going to be pretty sparse. They lost some guys to the transfer portal, like you said, but also with graduation, they lost Jack Sullivan, Branson Dean. Both of those guys combined for 8 sacks last year. So 8 sacks from the defensive tackle position is a good amount of production. So they're really going to be reliant on transfers and a lot of guys learning a new system. They had to go to the transfer portal for the 2 guys who are going to start at corner, a guy from Stanford and a guy from Penn State. And both of those guys were backups at those respective schools. So their defense is a major question mark. Offensively, this team will be good.
Yeah. The good example of what you're talking about with the scheme switch is Kydran Jenkins, because he played defensive end last year. He had 8 tackles for loss and 7 hurries, but now he's moving outside linebacker. So are we going to get kind of a Snowden at UVA kind of look from him, where they'll stand him up, he'll come rushing around the edge? But I think he could be scary as an outside linebacker, so that could be a problem. But the linebacker unit is good. Robbie talked about that. And they lost a projected starter inside linebacker after spring as well in Wahlberg. So the safeties are solid. The linebackers should still be good despite Wahlberg bouncing. The corners, I don't know. Let's go to this game overall. I think their offense will present a stiff challenge, as Sam talked about. Light years better than ODU. But the fact that it's early in the season, their defense is what is much bigger concern to me, because our offense is still going to be hopefully getting their feet underneath them, and defenses tend to be ahead of the offenses anyway. This guy is a defensive guy coming in as their coach. So this could be kind of a bit of a slobber knocker. I feel like it could be a little bit of hopefully a low scoring game if our defense shows up.
Yeah. And if, for context, Purdue is 5.5 point favorites week 1 against Fresno State at home. Fresno State, a team that's expected to go about 6-7 wins in the Mountain West this year. So to give you a little bit of context to that, that's where Purdue is sitting week 1. But like you said, Pete, if this game is week 4 or week 5, I feel much less confident in it. But the fact that it's week 2, I think the Hokies could win this one by a touchdown or so. Purdue is just they didn't bring in a lot of talent this offseason.
Yeah.
Did you guys know when Hudson Card decided to do his transfer to Purdue? Was it before or I'm assuming it was after Braum was gone, right? Because Braum left in December.
Yeah, I think it was
right?
after.
Yeah. So there's something to be said for a guy coming out of Texas with the cachet of Texas, going to Purdue that just lost its head coach and is overhauling both its offensive and defensive coordinators. And that's like the destination he ends up in. So I don't know. I think the guy is very talented. I do think there are some warts there that some teams saw. Otherwise, I think he's probably playing in different colors this year than playing from the Boilermakers.
I think on our offensive side that our pass game could be effective in this game. I know that I talked about, their defense could be good, but if we get the ball out quick against an aggressive defense, because I do think that Walters likes to kind of play an aggressive style, we'll have a chance. And there are some holes that can be found in that defense. Ultimately, I'll go right back to the beginning. They lost a lot of talent to the NFL and the portal. And at a place like Purdue with a brand new coach, that's not a recipe for having a very strong start to your season. So they'll be significantly worse than the team that won the division. They did win the Big Ten division and go to the Big Ten championship game last year, but this is not the same team. I'm thinking it'll be a tight game. And I think if Pry wins this game, it means he absolutely won the coaching battle in this game if we win. All right, let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor and do a beer break. And so you guys have heard about Prize Picks. The 2D Hokies Under the Influence podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy app that allows you to make plays with our very own Hokies players. So come this fall, you'll be able to get some action on Allie Jennings' receptions, Malachi Thomas's yards, our quarterbacks' TD numbers. Some people have been talking that Drones is still going to be the starter. Brian Siegler was out there this week saying Drones is going to be the guy. We'll wait and see about that, but you will be able to make some plays on them this fall. In the meantime, you've got MLB. You can make plays on Summer League, esports. Prize Picks has it all. A lot of chances to get money in your pocket. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code Memory Lane for a deposit match up to $100. That's Memory Lane, all one word, and you'll get that deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. Right now, Rob, I need to know what you're drinking.
I have had this on the podcast, but my shipment's not getting in tomorrow of my non-alcoholic beers. So I am having the BrewDog Punk AF, the Punk as F word. Keeping it clean tonight, just like the no alcohol content for me. But
for all the kids that'll listen to our previews.
Yeah, for all the 6-year-olds and under that haven't heard the F word yet, they need to keep it clean for them. But this is almost a classic at this point, non-alcoholic hoppy pale ale that's been around for a while, and it's delicious, and that's why I have it sitting around the fridge on a day that I didn't get a shipment of new beers in. So that's me. What are you having, Pete?
I am having the Mother Earth Brewing Company Cali Creamin'. This is a vanilla cream ale, creamsicle flavored cream ale. So yeah, I know this is not really even real beer. People are probably going to clown me for it, but I saw it in the store, and I know a lot of times in the beer store, since there are so many, I do hit up Untapped while I'm in the store because I just don't want to buy something that's a 3.2 and have to throw half of it out. So I'm like, this is kind of a funny name. The can looked cool. And I was like, you know what? Let me see what it is. It was like a 3.8, 3.9. So I was like, all right, I'm going to a 4th of July party. I'll buy the Cali Cream and Virginia Cream Ale, vanilla cream ale, creamsicle. It's good. I'm not a huge creamsicle guy, but I was feeling frisky, and the color is kind of like a copper color. But it tastes exactly like a creamsicle. Like if your girl really doesn't like the beer or whatever, or your man, but they like a little sweetness, they would probably drink this and not even know it's a beer. It's really tasty, 5% alcohol. I think it's from California. They're always drinking weird stuff out there. So yeah, Vista, California, the Cali Creamin' Virginia Cream Ale Creamsicle. I'd recommend it if you just want to have one. A little too sweet to have too many, but it was a good beer, and I kind of went out on a limb. I almost went with the Sam Adams since we got Sam on the podcast, but we've been talking about that too much lately. But they put out a mix pack, Sam Adams, that I've seen at like 4 different parties now. It's the Take a Day IPA, which is a new one. It's this like pineapple sour kind of thing they got going on, the Porch Rocker, and of course the Sam Summer. And it's a pretty good mixed pack. But like I said, I went to graduation party. I went to a July 4th party. They all had this mixed pack of Sam Adams. The cans are all colorful, but the Take a Day IPA is pretty solid. I know Sam hasn't put out a ton of great IPAs, but that one's good.
So I think I brought this up last time you had a cream ale on here, but how would you rank it against Genesee cream ale? Have you had it?
It's definitely better than Genesee cream ale. Now, if you're on a bachelor party in New Jersey and someone breaks out a case of Genesee, sometimes you need to drink 10, but otherwise stay away from it.
And I think I also told this story of, do you remember who was the biggest fan and used to always, it was like a running joke, but it just became it wasn't a joke anymore at a certain point after like a year or two of it. But the big fan of Genesee cream ale in college was Eric Neander.
Oh, really?
President of baseball operations for the Tampa Bay Rays, a Virginia Tech grad, loved his Genesee cream ale.
Yeah, I mean, Eric was an absolute savage in college. People think he's this classy GM of the year, whatnot. The Rays were kicking ass earlier this season, but he was a crazy man, just as most of us were in college. And Robbie was actually pretty good friends with him. Yeah. All right, guys, let's move on to Rutgers. This is a game in New Jersey. We're going on the road, 9/16, 3:30 p.m. on Big Ten Network. And I'm pumped about this. And the Sons of Saturday, Billy is from New Jersey. Pat, I think, is from or lives in New Jersey at one point. They're all organizing a big ticket group to go to the game. T-shirts, tickets. They put it out on their social media. So if you want to go to the Rutgers game, make sure to send them a DM and they'll give you the details on how to get involved with the ticket purchase. I'm going, my mom's going, my cousins are going, Robbie might be coming up. I got some other college buddies that are coming up, but the Rutgers game is going to be awesome. And it's also their Scarlet Day. So it's going to be a wild scene. Rutgers, Schiano is back, as we know. This is year 4, I think, this will be year 4 of his return. Yep. I didn't realize he was there for 11 years before that. I mean, he was really there a long time. He had an over 500 record, and we know that he did get them really going, the best they've ever been going. But it hasn't been that great the last couple years. Sam, fill us in a little bit on how Rutgers has been going under Schiano.
Yeah, so you see, the thing about Rutgers is they lost a lot of games last year by a lot of points. They got and look, they played a much tougher schedule than Virginia Tech could possibly imagine. But I mean, they just got worked in some games. I mean, they lost 55-10 to Penn State, 37-0 to Maryland, 52-17 to Michigan, 31-0 to Minnesota, 49-10 to Ohio State. They gave up 27 points to Iowa. Mm-hmm. I don't even think the Iowa scoreboard goes up to 27.
That's crazy. They almost got to 30, famous number.
And this was, we talked about EPA. Rutgers was 130th in EPA per game offense last season. Virginia Tech wasn't even that bad. When you adjust for opponent and venue, they were 125th, and Virginia Tech was 87th. So just put it in perspective right there. How bad
we were basically air raid compared to them.
I mean, we're the Kansas City Chiefs compared to these guys. They're not doing too swift. And Schiano is kind of grasping at straws right now. They brought in a new offensive coordinator, Kirk Ciarrocca, and who's been bounced around a lot of places. He's actually at Penn State in 2020 when Brent Pry was there. The funny thing about this is Greg Schiano actually fired Kirk Ciarrocca from Rutgers about a decade and a half ago. So
they made up
at straws and Piscataway, New Jersey.
This team, returning starters doesn't really matter because they were so dreadful. They have 4 projected returning starters. Of the terribleness that was last season, they still lost 3 of their most productive players, 2 wide receivers and a running back. So they're starting fresh, which is probably a good thing for how abysmal this offense was last year. They did have one guy, Samuel Brown, who is back this year. He was supposed to either be a starter or compete for starting last year. I guess he had a foot injury. And, the quarterback, Gavin Wimsatt, I guess, played the last 5 games of last year when things really derailed with a 45% completion rate, which was about second worst in the country. So this offense needs to really take some steps forward to be competent and just be, never mind serviceable. So there's not really much excuse for letting them put up a decent number of points on Virginia Tech.
No, this is absolutely a game that we should keep them to a low number. Now, we might get kept to a low number too. We'll talk about the defense in a minute, but we're on the road in this one. And this is going to be like years ago when Pitt came into Blacksburg and we had like 100 yards of offense and the game was 17-10 or something, 13-10. That's what this could end up being because this offense is so bad. Our defense should be able to hold them down. Wimsat, like one of the worst quarterbacks in all of FBS. They scored 17 points a game. That was 124th in the country, 130th in total offense in FBS versus FBS, 130th. So when they played decent teams, they couldn't move the ball at all. And if you look at the SP plus for their offense after spring, they're 95th and we are 90th. And we know how bad we were, and they're 5 spots worse. And in some of Sam's numbers, they were clearly much worse than us. So their passing efficiency was 129th. The other guy, Evan Simon, say they decide to start him, he's bad too. So they literally had one of the worst pass efficiencies in the country. They didn't address it in the portal. They don't have a freshman, I think, that's coming in that's about to start or anything. They get 2 top running backs back, but neither of them went over 500. Just 2 starters back on the O-line. So again, you want to pivot to the run game. They were 87th in TFL last year allowed per game. So I'm not sure that's going to work for them. This is a game where our defense should be able to get off, get some pressure, maybe get some turnovers, and keep that number low. Let's flip over to the defense. Sam, what's going on with the Rutgers defense?
Well, contrary to the offense, this is actually a pretty good defense within reason. So, I think the best way is if they can muddy the game up and make it a low-scoring, grind-out affair, that's when this defense can really shine. And they return a ton of guys. They're experienced. They're solid. Once you kind of get the ball rolling against this defense, though, it does tend to spiral out of control. But if you low scoring first and second quarter, then they can kind of keep you down for the whole game. But, they're not a great defense by any means, but they can muddy the waters a bit. So I think for Virginia Tech in this game, the key is limit penalties, hopefully 1 or 2 turnovers max, play clean football, and you should be able to score on this team. But holding penalties, false starts, a few, mistimed fumbles and turnovers, and you can kind of hit a brick wall against this Rutgers team.
I think, the talent really has a good chance to be a very solid defense right now. And to Sam's point, assuming that they can get a breather from the offense, which they didn't get much of it last year. You got a defensive lineman, Aaron Lewis, who's second team projected all Big Ten. Jacoby Widmond and Max Melton, a linebacker and a defensive back, are projected third team. You got 2 guys that went out that were anticipated to be starters last year, defensive end Mohamed Tori and linebacker Moses Walker. And then you get 2 solid transfers in, I think a cornerback Eric Rogers and Flip Dixon, strong safety. So honestly, I don't think I went through most of my checks through Athlon is what I used for mine. I don't think they were giving enough credit to this defense, quite frankly, and looking where the position ranks were against the rest of the Big Ten. I think it was an overlook on their part, because we'll see if the stats don't show up and the play doesn't show up this year. I think it's more due to the fact that these guys couldn't get off the field because the offense was, 3 and out repeatedly. I don't necessarily think it's going to be because of talent. I think they have some decent talent for a Rutgers team.
And that's a good point with regard to us and them, in that both offenses hung the defenses out to dry last year. And so both of these defenses could be significantly better if the offenses are just a little bit better. And you talked about a bunch of the names. I mean, Max Melton is another all-conference pick. Deion Jennings was their leading tackler. He's back too. So I think I read something that someone said they could be a top 5 defense in the Big Ten. Now, that would that would mean they played their best and their offense was decent. But if they've got that kind of potential, because their D line, it's by bar none the best unit on the team. Like that, there's some real dudes on that D line, and there's other guys in the back seven. So the offense will be bad. Should be able to keep them under control. They only scored 13 points a game versus FBS teams last year. So if we can keep them to 13, even with it being on the road, we got to be able to get 2 touchdowns up there and win the game. Now I know that's an average, but you get my point. Get aggressive versus their QB when we're on defense. Maybe pop a couple turnovers, get their defense tired out. It's going to be a little bit warm, and maybe we'll have a chance. The passing will be difficult for us. I think that's going to be hard.
And I don't want to mince words. This is not a Georgia defense. So if we should be able to, that there are no excuses for being under 20 points against this team. So it is all relative. But yes, it should be good for Rutgers team as of late. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think we do enough to squeak out this win. I asked Robbie a couple weeks ago, which game do you feel better about? The Purdue game at home or the Rutgers game on the road? And at the time I was like, oh man, I really don't know, but I feel way better about this game. Like,
I agree.
This is one of the worst Power 5 teams in the country, probably a bottom 5 or 6. So, I think in general, it's a good barometer for the program. Like if you can't beat Rutgers, whether it's home or road, maybe you're not making the progress that you need to be making. Right. So, I mean, Power 5 road games, they just don't come easier than this game. So you got to take advantage of it if you can.
Did you, Sam, I know you were doing some work on our home field advantage. How is SHIT Stadium on their home field advantage?
If you give me 10 seconds,
I didn't mean to
pull it up.
But yeah, go for it, man.
Piscataway home field advantage. How many points is that worth? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, it's SHI Stadium, but I just watched the movie Accepted for the first time the other night. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. It's an old like Jonah Hill and Justin Long movie, and they create a college called South Harmon Institute of Technology, which is shit. And that's what like it's SHIT Stadium because they play like shit there.
I got them at 77th, right between Duke and Colorado State.
Okay, so not a great home field advantage.
Kind of the surrounding area of Durham, North Carolina, and none of the scenery of Fort Collins, Colorado. So, yeah,
nicely said.
Not much home field advantage up there.
All right, let's move to Marshall. This game, I think, could be trouble. We're going on the road yet again. G5 team, second year in a row we're playing a G5 on the road. Not ideal. It's just like putting the line 923 in Huntington. In their FPI and SP plus numbers are both 66 on the nose, and Athlon has them at 71. So right around where we are according to the projections. Last year they were 9-4. They beat Notre Dame. It was well publicized. Went into South Bend, won the game, and finished 5-3 in the Sun Belt. A pretty good conference. This year they're 7-5 and second in the Sun Belt East. They did, I think they're only like born, and that was an undrafted free agent. So it's not like they lost a lot of talent, but they did lose a handful of key guys. 6 all-conference players in the preseason, according to Athlon. And we got head coach Charles Huff in year 3, a guy that when he was hired was someone that we were all very interested in before his recruiting prowess at Alabama.
To set the table here for those that don't have the schedule in front of them, we have in the first 4 games, we have two teams from the Big Ten, opposite conferences, and 2 teams from the Sun Belt in the same side of the conference. And that's wild to have in the first 4 games. But I think Marshall is projected to finish second in their side of the conference, and if you want to compare that to ODU's, I think, supposed to finish dead last. So that'll probably give you a barometer of where, the first 4 games are lining up to be.
And as opposed to ODU, this team, Marshall, won their last 5 games of the season last year. So they're kind of running hot. And they got a new DC because the current guy, he was hired away. I forget who he got hired away by, but the GT linebackers coach has come over to be the new DC, and Clint Trickett, a name you might remember from Last Chance U and West Virginia and Florida State, he returns as the offensive coordinator for Marshall. So the offense will probably be fairly similar in nature because they have the same quarterback. They got this running back that was a stud 2 years ago, and then last year in Rasheen Ali. What do you think about their offense, Sam?
I think they're very similar to Virginia Tech's offense, where last year it's just they were like an old car that just couldn't get started. The quarterback play was really poor. They went to Cam Fencher for the last 7 games, and he did pretty well, albeit against a little bit worse opponents. And their defense, I think the story of this team is the defense. We'll get to them. Offensively, Rasheen Ali is really good. I think he's one of the better running backs Tech will play all season. And this offensive line is, one, they're extremely large. They'll play about 4 or 5 guys that are taller than 6'6". Their starting left tackle is 6'9", 326 pounds.
Dang.
So they're size-wise, they're going to be significantly larger than Virginia Tech up front. That's just the reality. They don't have a lot of playmakers, though, and quarterback play is pretty spotty. They rely on running the football, maybe more than any team Tech will play this season. So a big test for the interior of the defensive line and linebacker core for the Hokies.
Yeah, and Ali went for 1,400 yards, just to put a number on it as a freshman. 1,400 yards, 5.6 yards per carry, and 23 touchdowns. That's Lee Suggs' touchdown numbers right there. So he only played 3 games due to injury last year, but he was an absolute monster 2 years ago. So getting him back behind a big offensive line, two of those offensive linemen are all conference preseason. So that's good for them. Now, the offensive line in general, I think their depth is a little rough, but that is kind of how it goes at a G5. But for a G5, this is a good offensive line, and they will be running the football because the quarterback, you talked about like maybe not against good opponents. Well, his QBR was 32.6, which is an opponent adjusted stat. 32.6 is bad. That is a poor efficiency for a QB. 120 passer rating is just meh. It's not terrible, but it's not very good. So 10 TDs to 6 INTs for Francher. I'm not so worried about the pass. I'm worried about their run game and our defensive line holding up and what we get out of our new look linebackers, how they're gonna do against this team. But defensively, Rob, what are you thinking for the Marshall defense?
They definitely have some good talent on there. They got Owen Porter, defensive end, linebacker Eli Neal, and a cornerback. So all 3 levels, they got projected first team all Sun Belt. I only had them as getting 3 starters back, but I do think the defense is going to be a pretty good strength of this team. In comparison to the offense, which is much more one-dimensional. And I think it really starts with those 3 guys. So overall, I think this is going to be another salty game. And I think we managed to give them, a good amount of confidence against Virginia Tech. So I'm a little bit worried about their defense, but we're 4 games into the season at this point. I'm hoping that the offense has established itself, or at least somewhat of an identity by this point in this juncture in the season, almost a third of the way through, and we'll see. But they definitely have some key pieces to cause trouble for us.
I think you were right with that 3 starters back, because besides the 3 guys you named, they're very thin across the defense. And that's good, because last year this team was number 3 in the country in yards per play. So the fact that they lost a ton is very good for us. I hate the circumstances around this game, because we're coming off 2 straight P5s. They have a bye, and their first game is against Albany. Their second game is against ECU. So in terms of being fresh, like, they're going to be a lot more fresh. Now, we'll be far more battle tested, and maybe, rust versus rest, right? The ultimate debate. What's better? 4 games into the year, it might work to our advantage. But damn, that's not cool that we got to go on the road after playing 2 P5s when this team gets a bye. That's very annoying. How do you see the game playing out, Sam?
I've been very positive so far for the first 3 games. I'll save the long diatribe about the fact that Virginia Tech is the only major college football program to schedule games like these, even though the circumstances were what they were a few years ago. You talked about they lost a lot on defense, but they brought back all their best players, right? They brought back Owen Porter, who's a game record at defensive end. They brought back Eli Neal, who's one of the best G5 linebackers in the country. They had 18 interceptions last year, and they bring back most of that production. So for me, I don't have good vibes about this game. They are good at the things Virginia Tech will be bad at. They are good in the trenches. They are good at playing physical. They're good at running the football. They're good at causing turnovers. All of those things are bad for Virginia Tech. I have on my notes also that, there might be a cruel twist of fate in this game. 20-17 is what came to my head. That was the score of the Old Dominion game last year. So unfortunately, I think this is going to be one of those games where we see the program kind of come back down to earth, and we see how, maybe they did a good job addressing the skill position players in the transfer portal, and they've recruited up some good guys in the defensive backfield. But in the defensive front seven and on the offensive line especially, this program still has a long ways to go. And I think you're going to see that against a team that's done a really good job of building that.
Yeah, I look at it like this. They're gonna want to run. So Pry are focused on and maybe blitzing a fair amount against this quarterback. And if you can stop the run, we'll have a chance. But just like you said, if we manage to win this game, it's a low-key huge win for our program, because it's kind of almost like a scheduled loss. Like that's kind of how I see it, because you got a big game the following week we're going to get into, coming off 2 big games. Maybe you go on the road, you beat Rutgers, immediately back on the road. Like that, it just sucks. So it would be a huge win. Stop the run. Maybe we'll have a chance. And
I don't think we can forget that also this is a team that went on the road into South Bend and beat, Notre Dame, forget what Notre Dame was last year and think more about just going up there and playing them and having been the number 8 team in the country. And they beat Notre Dame. So there's not going to be a whole lot of fear from them with Virginia Tech, the way that we've been playing the past, call it 5 seasons, with us coming to town.
Yeah, and also, we're looking at this in mid-July. This matchup could look very different in mid-September. Yes. We'll see what these teams look like. Marshall has plenty of question marks. Again, like on Lindy's magazine I'm looking at right now, they're ranked 109th, right? So this is not a very, which I think is pretty harsh, but still, you look at that, even give them 20 spots, right? Give them to number 89. That's still significantly lower preseason hype than you have for the Hokies. So contextualize it a bit. For me, the spot is just a really bad spot for Virginia Tech.
That's actually a really good point, Sam, is that sometimes we get married to these ranking ideas, but it's just like NFL, NBA draft. Like one team can see one place can see a team really good, other place can and cannot. And that's because this Marshall team is such an unknown. With losing all those defensive starters, this is going to be a test into what has Huff built there. Has he built enough infrastructure into that program that they can lose a bunch and still play well? We don't know. And so, they could be 100th. They could be 60th as they're projected in Athlon. So we'll just have to wait and see. We're going to get into our ACC games now. Pitt and Florida State are our last 2 games that we're going to do tonight. Pitt is a home game, 9:30, September 30th. Never liked playing Pitt, but at least we're at home. Don't go to Hines or whatever it's called now. In the FPI, they're number 35. SP Plus, a little bit lower at 41. And despite winning 20 games the last 2 seasons, they are projected at 8-4. So maybe just coming down a little, but still being a bowl team, a potential top 25 team. Performed okay in the portal, but they lost there's a decent amount. 6 guys drafted out of the Pitt program, and he's been getting it up, but 6 guys drafted for Pitt, that could be hard to replace. What do you think, Sam?
Actually, I have down they had 7 defensive players drafted.
Oh, is that right? Maybe
I think so. I think
could be off by a number. Yeah.
Well, regardless, a lot of really good players left this team. We talked about Tarp a little bit earlier. Pittsburgh's actually coming in at 123rd in returning production.
I like that.
Allocating returning production, 123rd. They lose a lot of guys. There's a lot of question marks on this team, but again, Pat Narduzzi's been able to do this where he recruits his guys. They play into their system. They play a brand of football, and quite frankly, it's a brand of football that has given Tech fits. I think outside of the 28-0 game that Virginia Tech had at home in the rain, outside of that matchup, this series has been all Pittsburgh for quite some time now. So, it's one of those programs that they have Tech's number recently.
Yeah, they certainly have our number. The Abinaconda, I think he just scored another touchdown in last year's game. 6 touchdowns, 300 yards, whatever it was. These pitiful, no pun intended, but these games when we play Pitt and having historic numbers put up against, it's so aggravating and getting so old. They're just not that good of a program for us to be so embarrassing against them so often. And even despite those losses, we talked about the draftees, they have 10 projected all-conference guys. One's a kicker, one's a punt returner, but still, that is a lot of all-conference players that seem to lose so much. So Narduzzi has done a tremendous job. I know we all hate him, but he's done a tremendous job at that school, finishing in the top 25 the past 2 years. And they brought in Phil Jerkovich, a quarterback, a guy we know from BC and a guy that has shown flashes to be borderline elite. He's never put it together, but he's a borderline elite passer when he's playing at his best.
Yeah, he is probably, I can't think of another quarterback that has transferred twice and pretty much stayed in the same conference, if you want to count Notre Dame. That is wild. He's gone from Notre Dame to BC to Pitt. He's got two teams on his schedule that he was on their team. They literally can scout against him. He's playing BC and Notre Dame this year, which is unbelievable. His 2002 or 2020 and 2021 seasons were pretty damn good. And last year, we don't know what he could have done because BC's offensive line was absolute trash. It was horrible. So we have no clue. If he kind of comes to this team and puts in a 2020, 2021 season, I think they could be good. And then you got Rodney Hammond Jr. as the starter. And he is obviously replacing Abinaconda, who was incredible, absolutely just an incredible player. But Rodney Hammond is supposed to be very, very good. And I think part of the reason he didn't get to see the field is because of, just how high end that talent was. And at wide receiver, I think they get 2 of their 3 starters back, with Kanata Mumfield and Bub Means, which is a cool name actually. And I think the offense, it'll all rely on what Jerkovich does, but it could be pretty decent. And that is not the side of the ball that really, Pitt is known for causing headaches for people. And they have a good defense once again.
Yeah. Sam, what do you think about that offense? And because I'm looking at it, 99th in pass efficiency with JT Daniels last year. And now you're bringing in Jerkovich and Frank Signetti, who was Jerkovich's OC at BC in 2021 when he played at his best, is at Pitt. But it's hard for me with Jerkovich not playing full seasons. And efficiency-wise, he was dead last in the ACC last year. And he was also dead last behind his own teammate in Evan Moorhead. So you can blame the offensive line, but both those teams played behind the same line. And he was actually worse than his horrible teammate in Emmett Moorhead. So I don't know what Jerkovich we're going to get, but he is reunited with Signetti, and maybe they'll improve upon that 99 pass efficiency this year.
Well, he also had Zay Flowers with him last year. So it's not like he wasn't throwing to anybody, right? Zay Flowers will probably start for the Ravens. And as a Browns fan, I'm terrified of him. Rodney Hammond, a Norfolk 757 recruit guy, he's really good. He's more of a scat back. He's quick on the outside, smaller guy. But I mean, they're going to be classic Pitt. They're going to run the ball really well. I think they have some good wide receivers that really aren't going to beat you downfield, but are going to beat you on slip screens, bubble screens, quick slants, things like that, which is kind of where I think Jerkovich is best at as a pro style quarterback. Stand in the pocket, 1-2, make the throw. That's kind of his game. So, offensively, I don't think Pitt will be a very good team, but I think of all of the teams Virginia Tech plays this early part of the season, Pittsburgh's maybe the one where you might want to bet the over in this game, because I think they're going to surprise people with how well they do against this Chris Marv defense, not Brent Pry defense right now, but Chris Marv defense. They scare me a bit on offense.
Yeah,
the matchups do.
You're right on with Jerkovich, actually, because Narduzzi wants to run the ball. Even when they had Kenny Pickett doing awesome, he wanted to run more. And so they're going to run, and that's going to help Jerkovich be comfortable and get it to these wide receivers, which are pretty legit. It's a way better supporting cast, not just the line, the whole way around for Jerkovich. And so he probably will play well as long as he can stay healthy, because he hasn't shown that he can do that. Going to the defense, it's funny because you look at the SP Plus for their offense, it's 9 spots ahead of where the defense is. So the defense for a Pat Narduzzi team is projected to be worse than the offense, which I don't buy, but that's how the projections are coming in now. Their defense has been number 2 in sacks per game. I think, 4 straight years, number 2 or number 1, 4 straight years in a row. It's absolutely ridiculous. They were not top 25 in most categories last year, but their top 4 tacklers are gone, and there's just one starter back on the defensive line. And the back 7, I think, is still really good. And I'll let one of these guys talk about the players, but I think at the end of the day, your defense, they're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to play aggressive. They're going to play physical. He's going to whine for calls. But there's a potential here that Pitt's defense actually takes a step back after being very good the last few seasons. I don't know which one of you guys wants to fill in on some of the.
Well, I was just going to hit. I think this is actually a broader point, but I think Athlon mailed in the ACC coverage this year as I read through all the teams. And I don't know if you picked up on this, Pete, either, but the write-ups were terrible compared to other teams, and the rankings didn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's Pat Narduzzi defense. This is a team that lost a ton of people to the NFL. Like, there's going to be a step back. They're returning 5 projected starters from last year, and they're ranked fourth, and third in DL, linebacker, and DB positions in the ACC. And I don't see it being that clean for Pitt. There's gonna be some growing pains, I think, for this team. That said, MJ Devonshire is a stud. He's going to go all ACC this year. They got linebacker Shane Simon, who's good. Bengali Kamara is also the 2 linebackers. So the linebacker unit's going to be solid. I do think that they're going to be good, but that is a lot of reloading to try and do from one season to the next, and feel like you're going to have that elite of a defense that you're going to put out there again.
Yeah, I think the linebackers are so versatile, and that's what's going to make this defense go. They both get to the quarterback. I think a ton of hurries, even though they weren't putting up tackle for loss numbers, a lot of hurries from these guys. And Narduzzi likes to play aggressively. The CBs and the safeties are pretty good. You mentioned Devonshire. So at the end of the day, 5 games into this season, they're going to be tough. They're going to come to Blacksburg. It's going to be a tough game. But I like Sam's theory that maybe this kind of goes the other way for once. And we kind of get a little bit of a back and forth because there's a lot of new guys playing for the Pitt team, and against us, Jerkovich and company might, get the ball moving. It could be a higher scoring game if this Pitt defense does in fact take that step back.
Yeah, 2 things on this Pitt defense. First off, we talk about in college football, programs like Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh, they have development cycles, right? And those are kind of peaks and valleys of how good a certain side of the ball or how good your team is going to be. Pittsburgh's in the valley of a development cycle right now. They did a really good job with a lot of those guys, but those NFL draft picks they had last year, they had been contributing for the last 2 or 3 years on this defense. So a lot of those top national defenses were those guys who are now gone. So it's definitely a test for this Pittsburgh coaching staff. I think, though, if you go back to the 2016 Virginia Tech Pittsburgh game, that was the game where Gerard Evans just kept throwing deep balls to Isaiah Ford and Bucky Hodges, and Pitt couldn't stop it, and Tech kind of started to control that game in the second half. Pittsburgh cornerbacks, although they are pretty good, are 5'11" and 5'9". Okay. Do you have any idea how short you have to be in real life to be listed at 5'9" on a football roster? I mean, that is a child. I mean, I'm sure he's a good football player, but 5'9". Virginia Tech's starting 2 wide receivers, Ollie Jennings and Daquan Felton, will be 6'2" and 6'5" respectively. So if Tyler Bowen can scheme it up, you could have an 8-inch differential between Daquan Felton lined up against, and let me get his name. I'm sorry for putting him on blast, but Marquise Williams.
It's Marquise Williams, yeah.
You could have an 8. I mean, that's just throw it up, and he won't have a shot but to do pass interference. So if Virginia Tech takes advantage of that matchup, this could be the 2016 game all over again, where Virginia Tech wins a game that they maybe shouldn't win.
Yeah, if you got an 8-inch differential between you and another guy, girls are going to notice. I mean, that is.
they in fact will. And that point, that in the words of Mac Brown, that's a tall on a small. That's what we're going for in this game. We're trying to throw it up, and if Grant Wells is the quarterback, we should have that ability. I also think we may not see Jerkovich in the game. We might see the kid that transferred from Penn State, a guy that we were interested in, Villu, right?
Christian Villu, one of the best high school arms I've ever seen on film.
Okay, yeah, that could
not a very good college quarterback, apparently.
Yeah, he left Penn State. Film. He left Penn State to go be a backup behind Phil Jerkovich. Not something I really understand, but we know the Pitt game's going to be a rock fight. Now that could be a high-scoring rock fight, or it could be a 13-10. But I want to beat them at home. I freaking hate Pitt so much. Like, that's a game I really, really want to win, and we'll have a shot. I know the West Virginia game is a good corollary last year, and even the Pitt game. Like, we were in that game until the Caleb Smith. I'm mixing up my generic last names, but we were in the Pitt game until that fumble. And we were in the West Virginia game until halftime, and then things got a little out of hand. Those are the kind of things I want to see go differently this year, where we just don't kind of like stumble all over ourselves and lose in the second half. And this Pitt game should be a good test for something like that.
Bring the pain, Pete.
Final game. Yeah, we've got a nasty one here. We're going down to the Tallahassee. Florida State on October 7th. Our last visit to Florida State went pretty well. But this one might not be the same. They
remember that too. Yeah.
That's a good point. We talked about revenge for a couple of our games. I think Florida State wants to get some revenge for that swag surf and then fall on their face back in 2018, I think it was. But they are top 10 in Athlon, number 7, top 10 in SP Plus at number 10, and just outside the top 10 in FPI at number 14 going in this year. They brought back so much for a team that was as good as they were last year. They only had one guy drafted, I believe. And they supplemented in the portal like nobody's business. They were number 9 in the portal index. So not only were they already loaded up, they didn't sit on their laurels. They went out and they got a bunch of dudes to come in, enough so to give you 13 all-conference preseason, 3 all-American preseason. And if you just go by their position groups, because Athlon likes to put the position groups at least in the top 10 nationally. I think they have 4 position groups in the top 10. And so this team is freaking loaded up. Mike Norvell, he had bad offensive lines his first few seasons, and they really struggled. But he's just over 500 after 3 years, and he might go well over 500 going forward, because this team is projected to win the conference, beat Clemson twice, because that's pretty much what you have to do this year to win it all. And I'm scared. I'm scared. Who wants to kick off the offense in Jordan Travis?
I can kick it off. And just to finish off, so in the ACC, they go second, first, second, first. That's QB, running back, wide receiver, O-line, DL, linebacker, and DB. So
it's just them and Clemson. Yeah.
And that they even make Clemson look like a joke this year. Clemson's got, some fourth ranked and some fifth ranked, I think, in those
Oh,
position
wow.
groups. So yes, you hit on everything. Jordan Travis had an outstanding season last year, to say the least. 3,200 yards, 24 touchdowns. He had just 5 interceptions. They get Johnny Wilson, their wide receiver, back. They get Trey Benson, their running back, returning. They pretty much have everything going for them to take what was a very, very potent offense last year and make it even better, which would be pretty incredible. I think they get 8 out of 11 of their offensive players last year. They were 16th in scoring, 10th in total defense. Yeah, so they will be very, very good.
Sam was just talking about tall wide receivers. That's Johnny Wilson. He's 6'7". Like, I don't know. I know we have some bigger guys. Maybe you bring Cotman in because he's 6'3", and then you can try to mark Wilson. But that is going to be a very stiff challenge.
I mean, you're basically asking. I mean, so by the way, Florida State does play Pittsburgh. That would be a 10-inch differential right there. If you could say. So, I mean, this team is just loaded with athletes. I wrote down my first bullet point I wrote down was Virginia Tech will be playing who they want to be in 5 years. The level of high-level recruiting, keeping guys in the program, winning in the transfer portal, developing talent, developing a quarterback. Like Mike Norvell has done all of that. And you're seeing it come to fruition. This is a team that legitimately could, be playing in the college football playoff.
They really should be.
They're really good. They lost a couple of wide receivers and they brought in the best transfer wide receiver, a guy out of Michigan State. Like they are a very, very good football team. The hype is real for Florida State this year.
Do you remember? I think it was maybe 2017. Florida State was like preseason number 3. They played Bama first game, and DeAndre Francois blew out his knee in that game, and then they weren't the same. The difference between that Florida State team, one, I mean, obviously they lost their quarterback, but their offensive line wasn't nearly this good. Like this is a very good offensive line, and whoever the quarterback is, which is Jordan Travis for them this year, one, he's better than DeAndre Francois was back then. I mean,
absolutely.
His QBR is outrageously good. It was number 7 nationally last year. It was ahead of Bryce Young. You might remember him. And he had 24 TDs passing, another 7 rushing. He's up there for the Heisman. He's the 5th or 6th best Heisman odds. I have him at plus 1,500. It's not going to be easy for him to win the Heisman, but if Florida State goes undefeated, he'll have a damn good chance because he's just that good. Leading rushers back, leading wideouts back. The offense is really what scares me. The defense, it's going to be sick. We might not score at all. I don't know, but I'm looking at their offense and I'm worried they're going to drop 50 on us. Like that's really what is scaring me. But go into the defense. There should be better than the 14th in the SP Plus that they're projected. I think this is like a top 10 defense with Verse and Fabian Lovett. Their defensive line is absolutely ridiculous. They got 3 transfers that should play, and they already brought back guys. I don't know. What do you think about their defense, Sam? Do you have any comments there?
Yeah, they've done a really good job recruiting guys who fit their system over the past 2 or 3 years, and you're starting to see that. The Lindy's magazine that I'm reading, they list primary strengths and potential problems. Here's what they have as the potential problems for Florida State this season. Here's the quote: "The Seminoles don't have experienced depth at linebacker outside of Kalen DeLoach, Tatum Bethune, and DJ Lundy. They play a 4-2-5. Right? They only play 2 linebackers. So the biggest weakness on this team is that they only have 3 really good linebackers and they play 2.
Oh my gosh.
And both of those guys that they play are seniors and had 7.5 tackles for loss and 9 tackles for loss respectively in DeLoach and Bethune. I actually think because of some stuff that happened later in their portal business, the 2 holes, if you can call them that, on their team are slot receiver and safety. Those are the only 2 areas that are like a little weak. I was listening to Summer School with Bud, who obviously is a Florida State guy, and he expressed concern over the safety spot. And they're bringing in this slot guy, Winston Wright. He transferred from West Virginia. He's good, not great, and they don't have a ton behind him in the slot. But like everywhere else is absolutely loaded up. I don't even know how you could call linebacker one of their weaker spots. But
And
yeah, man, it's bad.
their defensive ends are nasty. So Patrick Payton was the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. That's coming back. And then you mentioned Jared Verse, but between the two of them, they had 14 sacks last year. So they're going to wreak havoc on our offensive line if it is the way that we think it's going to be. So this has the makings to be a very, very painful game for us.
Yeah.
Another team,
Xavier Chaplin is going to be up against it. Maybe
another
I took the
team-
words out of your mouth.
yeah, Xavier Chaplin, maybe one of the most important players for the first 6 games for the Hokies, but another team that has a bye week before playing Virginia Tech at home. So it is after the Clemson game. So if Florida State wins at Clemson, classic letdown spot at home against a mediocre at best Virginia Tech team.
So you're saying they play Clemson and then have a bye and then play us?
Yes, at Clemson.
Okay. See, and I'm totally with you because
this is just how college football works.
Yeah, like, I don't know if but the week off kind of nullifies the coming down effect a little bit. Like it kind of sucks that they get that week off, but nevertheless, it's a good point because if they do they could be like number 2. They could be number 1.
And I think that's legitimately the only thing Tech has in its favor is the letdown spot effect. And I think going in with nothing to lose, that's really all you got here, unfortunately.
And the nothing to lose. No, they're not gonna. They're gonna be 3 touchdown favorites. Or they'll be 17-point favorites, if not more in this game. Maybe more depending on how the first 5 games go.
I just want to hang, and every year Florida State has a game. NC State comes to town. They screw it up. They screw around. UVA every now and again sneaks up on Florida State. I'm not sure this is that Florida State that can be snuck up on, but college football is a weird game. And what I want to do in this game, just go down there, survive the week, hang as best you can, and get the hell out of there because it's not going to be. Now, if you get a chance, if they beat Clemson, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but this is fun. They beat Clemson. They're 5-6 games into the year. No one's probably going to have a better win than that. And they would have had to beat LSU too, right? Because LSU is one of their first games. I mean, they would probably be 1 or 2 if they were undefeated at that point.
Yeah, and also important for the Hokies, just like you said, kind of getting out of this game healthy. The very next week they play Wake Forest, and that's one of those make or break games for the Hokies when you talk about how they're going to finish this season. That's one of the toss-up games that you would like to win. So it's important for Virginia Tech to go out there, hang, stay healthy, don't get too down on yourself. Even if it ends up in a loss, at least have some moral victories here and there.
Yeah, that's a good point about Wake because it's not similar to Florida State in some ways, but that's a really good, well-coached team. And you want to be ready for that one because that's going to actually be winnable. I don't know how winnable Florida State's going to be. So you want to be prepared for that. And we will be tackling the Wake Forest game and all the rest of the games next week. We're actually bringing on another guest to help us with the second half. But Sam, you were friggin' awesome tonight. You brought numbers that I had no idea about, which is really great contributions. And you helped take some of the heavy lifting off of us for this episode. So thank you for doing that, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Enjoyed it. I learned way too much about Marshall football today. So
no one likes that. No one wants to know that. I know. I think about that stuff every year. And the alarm bells start to go off sometimes when you're doing this research. And something I didn't see was that Marshall offensive line that you mentioned being as big as they are. I knew they'd be good. I didn't know about the size. And so that's a bit of a concern, but, I thought I was hearing Robbie's dog. I guess that was Sam's dog.
My dog's having a moment this evening. I'm not really sure what's up. So I'll go check on him in a bit here.
That's okay. Well, we're about done. Rob, do you have any final comments or are you good to go? Oh, actually,
records.
I did want to do records. Yes. So 6 games. We talked about them: ODU, Purdue, Rutgers, Marshall, Pitt, and Florida State. Rob, I'll give it to you first, man. What do you think we're coming out after those first 6 games, and just your comments in general?
I'm boring. I want them to flip a win and a loss just to like shake it up, like almost black and red on the roulette table, but I'm going to stick with it. I got us 4-2 actually. Rattling off 4 wins and then the wheels come off.
And that's
Pitt and FSU. So boring.
That jives with what you said on our last episode, because you said 7-5 for the season, and
I did.
in order to go 7-5, we have to win 4 games in the first 6. I mean, even to go 6-6, I think, which was my prediction, I think we have to win 4 of those first 6 games, because Florida State's a surefire loss almost. So you gotta find a way to get to 4, because the ACC slate's going to be tough.
Yeah, and the Marshall game is the one that I have as that was the one that I may flip with the Pitt game, but I stuck with it. I have more confidence in Rutgers, Purdue, and ODU. The least sure of those from a W perspective for me is Marshall.
Yeah, I'm going 4-2 as well. I have them losing at Marshall and at Florida State. I have them 7-5 for the season right now. I think there is potential, not to get too positive on this, but there is a potential if Louisville doesn't look as good as a lot of people are saying they look, and that 3-game stretch, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Louisville, those are all winnable games for the Hokies. So there's a lot of potential in this season. 7-5 is where I'm landing, and I think 4-2 in the first 6 games, even though you would lose back-to-back ACC games. I think Hokie Nation would be pretty happy with the progress made through those 6 games.
Yeah, it would be more wins.
We didn't have one game last year, Pete. Okay, we don't know that it would be more games. It could be tied with the wins from last year.
That also includes Wofford.
11-game season, damn it.
It was only 11 games, god damn it. But yeah, I'm thinking 4-2. I don't know where the losses are going to come, but I just don't think there's so many toss-up games here. It really is going to be about Brent Pry's coaching in this first 6 games of the season. Like, we need him to come up so huge in the Purdue game, in the Rutgers game, in the Marshall game, potentially in Pitt. That's going to make or break this. Is it 2 or is it 4? Like, it could be 3, obviously. I'm not going to say every single number, but like, it's going to depend so much on Brent Pry's coaching, because I think the spreads are going to be tight. Like, in Fuente, one of the biggest knocks I always had on him down the stretch is games that were within 3.5 points either way, he lost almost all of them. Like, he was like 1-12 over his last 13 games or something really, really bad. So the swing it could be very large, but I like our odds to win 4 games. It gives us a little cushion to go 2-4 down the stretch and hit my 6-6 mark. But we're going to have to play well in the first 6 if we want to go to a bowl. All right, so that will do it. If you guys have any final comments, feel free to jump in, but you can hit us on Twitter. It's at 2DeepVT. You can find us on Instagram. You can email us, 2deepvt@gmail.com. You can go to sonsofsaturday.com. You can find Sam's podcasts on there. You can find our podcasts on there. Sam, where can people find you on Twitter?
I am at Sam of Saturday on Twitter. And if you are a TikTok user, Locks of Saturday on TikTok. We've started all of our college football futures bets. So we're talking a little more national on that platform and going over some win totals. So have some good content there for you if you're a TikToker as well.
Oh yeah, Sam likes to get deep in the weeds. He'll find a MAC team or maybe Hawaii, and he'll be like, "This is what I think about the over/under on Hawaii."
The next TikTok is about New Mexico State, the Fighting Jerry Kills.
I love it, man.
And I've never been more excited to bet over 5.5 wins than I am.
Is that Jerry Kill?
That is Jerry Kill, head coach Jerry Kill.
Nice.
Yeah, very exciting season upcoming for the Aggies.
Awesome, man. Well, that's going to do it for the podcast. We will be back next week to preview the final 6 games of the season, and hopefully we'll have another commitment in our pocket. But until then, go Hokies.